Hit the record button, and very excited about these final two panels. They got the illustrious final two spots to share a little bit more information. These are two topic areas that you all had identified through the survey tool that we sent out a little over a month ago, around two topic areas that were topics that you were most interested in hearing about. The first, Broward County will be talking a little bit about their work engaging schools and Broward County Public School System around violence and victimization from social media, both online threats, victimization, and bullying. And then we'll turn it over to Lompoc. They've been working very closely with community partners on setting the foundations for community violence intervention approaches to reduce violence and victimization as a result of community violence, group violence that's been impacting the Lompoc community. So with that, very excited to hear from Broward County first. I'll turn it over to Amy. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I know it's a long day. I will be going very quickly and I'll be showing you some different things, and hopefully I'll be able to pique your interest a little bit. So I'm going to be going over what are the main online school related dangers we're experiencing. I suspect they're going to be very similar to the ones that you are. And then what are we doing to address them? The primary school-related online dangers that we're seeing are cyberbullying, disruptive or criminal activity related to a lot of the TikTok challenges, as well as online threats. And these are the sources of our data that we use to determine these different dangers. In terms of cyberbullying, we early on identified that we were seeing a significant increase in cyberbullying among our middle schoolers. We didn't see it in high school, but in middle school, it was a real problem. So at that time, we created some different curriculums I'm going to tell you about, and we also identified it as one of the key problem areas that we wanted our grant to address. In terms of the criminal activity with social media challenges, I'm sure these are the same, devious licks that you all have dealt with. Primarily, the one that really caused the most arrests and the most property damage was damaging of bathrooms. I'm going to show you, we're very litigious, newsworthy district. And so I'm going to show you a number of news stories that are always constantly coming out that we're trying to combat with positive news.
New tonight, a warning for Broward teachers about a disturbing TikTok challenge. The teachers union sent out an email alerting educators about an October challenge to, quote, slap a teacher. The school system is taking this threat very seriously. Earlier this month, we showed you the damage left behind by the devious licks trend, which saw students stealing items and vandalizing school bathrooms across several Florida schools and then posting it to social media.
So a lot of that. And then we had online threats. We really saw this rise immediately following the, oh Lord, hold please. Let me see. Okay. Immediately following the return to schools after COVID. And we saw this same spike right after we suffered the Stoneman Douglas shooting tragedy.
The latest threat comes with schools across the country on high alert after a threat was posted on TikTok about threatening violence.
Miami-Dade and Broward County school districts both taking action with extra police on hand today. Local 10 News reporter Leanne Mahone joins us live from Fort Lauderdale.
She has a strong reaction about this threat from Broward Interim Superintendent Vicki Cartwright.
That's right. She's aiming her comments directly at TikTok and the federal government.
America's education system is under attack right now. We are under attack by a social media platform that will not intervene when it is necessary.
Interim Broward Superintendent Vicki Cartwright is aiming strong words at TikTok for not doing more to stop threats of violence against schools.
So we had numerous arrests, and half the time, you would hear, oh, I was just joking. The other half the time they were trying to, appear tough. A lot of different things sparked it, but it's the same spike, as I said, that we experienced the last time our district went through serious trauma. Other electronic trends that we're constantly addressing and that are included in many of the curriculum that I'm going to tell you about are all these other elements. But since they're not as significant, I'm not going to go over them specifically. So what are we doing to prevent school-related online dangers? It's hard to point to any one thing because we really do everything like you all do, structured around a multi-tiered system of supports. So as I tell you about the different things that we're doing, I'm going to introduce them in terms of not what the danger is, but whether the district is doing it in every single school with every single student, or some schools with some students, or few schools with few students based on their need. So that's really how we do everything in the district. And that's why it gets a little overwhelming sometimes to present everything that's being done. Additionally, every element, whether it's curriculum, PSA contests, marketing campaigns, we rely heavily on positive community norms marketing. Everything we do, we really push out in an effort to share accurate data around the fact that most students are behaving in healthy, excellent ways. It's just few students who are behaving maladaptively, but the perception is the majority are behaving maladaptively. And we know behavior follows perception with students. So we're constantly marketing out, well, some do, but most don't. So I'll show you a little more about that with some of the campaigns. So tier one, what are we doing universally in the district? This is a lot of words and I apologize. But please know this presentation is in the chat if you want to read it later. Universally, we're ensuring we have staff from our department that meets with each school's positive behavior interventions and supports team to analyze their data and determine in the big five, we call it. And that's the highest rates of discipline and what's going on both at the school and then individually, and then with teachers, which teachers are putting out the most discipline. So that's a really good way to bring interventions in if they find that electronic misconduct, sexting, etc., is one of the big five. Additionally, we make sure that we have staff, students, parents trained on anti-bullying policy. And within that, we mention both cyberbullying and sexting and video voyeurism. And then finally, one of the big ones too is prevention liaisons. Every single school has a prevention liaison that we train annually, and we provide those elements and those curriculum we want them to focus on. So for example, Think B4U Post, internet safety is a big one that we push out with them every year. Additionally, one thing that we instituted this year to get much better data related to these elements is a climate survey. So that will really help us drill down to an individual school limit to determine whether or not the interventions we're providing are effective and how big a problem is it at their school, because the news makes it sound like it's a massive problem, everybody's being assaulted everywhere at all times, when in fact the rates are not that high when we anonymously survey the students. We also changed some of our discipline coding to try to address things that are occurring at home not during school hours. So as you know, we cannot consequence students for saying and doing hurtful and horrible things the majority of the time when they're on their, in their own home. But if we can prove that it significantly impacts a child's ability to receive an education, or it incites a disturbance at school, we now can consequence that. So that's just a little piece, and it's something that hopefully we don't have to use very often. It's more intervention related, but that was instituted district-wide. We also started really strongly pushing out reporting campaigns out of concern to the threats that we're receiving. And again, it's in multiple languages. And we encourage students anytime they feel that there's any kind of threat, particularly if it's not imminent, but they want to have a friend get help, etc., to report their concerns. Additionally, we started upping our parent trainings a lot, and we ensured that it was a district mandate that every single school has to have this web page on their school site. And a big part of what we really like is we have social media use contracts that we use now. When a parent has a problem with their child, they're brought into the school, we sit down and did you know this is available to you? Why don't we set up a contract so you can monitor your child and their online usage while at home? Tier 1. I know I'm training so fast, I apologize. Tier 2. So what are we doing with some schools? Because we offer many of these things to all schools, but we can't make them do these things like we could make them do the tier 1 things. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about these curriculum and programs that are being pushed out every year to schools. So one of the big ones is the Be the One Positive School Culture Initiative. It's a 3-year program designed to move school climate. It talks about bullying, but it's really about being the one to do something kind, to be respectful, to help someone in need. And this is the basic structure of each year. And we do pre and post surveys, and we've had some really good results, but it takes a commitment for schools. So some schools choose to use it and some don't. Grades 3 through 12 have Think B4U Post available to them. That's a curriculum, kickoff assembly, parent trainings, everything you can imagine, designed in a multi-tiered system of supports for schools. Includes, for example, peer-to-peer programs as well, covering the 5 most common online dangers. Included with that is cyberbullying and threats. And each of these subject areas has 3 lessons for the students. When we push something like this out, it comes in this format. First, we send the memo. Included with it is the opt-in form. Once they return it, then the grant staff's going to reach out to them and develop the implementation plan. We really push fidelity because we know if we send it out to them, they don't use it with fidelity, the reputation will become, oh, that doesn't work. So we really make sure to do our best to support them to implement fully. Peer counseling mediation is another huge one with secondary schools. We highly recommend it. It's not for bullying, but it's very good at stopping rumor spreading and what could become cyberbullying, and then what rolls back onto school grounds as fights and sometimes threats. We do a lot, like I said, of pro-social marketing, both with posters and PSA contests. Here's an example of one that a school peer counseling program posted to TikTok that I happened to find one day.
Tayal, what do you think about Think B4U Post?
I think that's a very good thing because a lot of things that we post, the second we post it, we really regret it.
Thank you. Baby, what do you think about Think B4U Post?
I think that's really good because if you think before you post, then you won't put anything embarrassing about other people and they'll respect you more for that.
Thank you. Do you think that it's important to think before you post?
Yes, because if you don't think before you post, maybe somebody could look for you or try to hunt you down, but if you post responsibly, then nothing bad will happen.
Thank you.
Think before you post.
So they're so cute. I love it. I love the kids produce stuff, and the kids much prefer the kids produced materials. Class meetings is also huge. We strongly recommend it's done school-wide in each classroom at least once a week. Again, it really cuts down the conflict both at school and at home. Dating Matters is a curriculum that we became familiar with the CDC when we piloted their Dating Matters curriculum based off safe dates. So this curriculum particularly we want utilized with fidelity. We found that the data from that, all these curriculums are very SEL, right? So you may have benefits in terms of reduction of dating violence, but in reality, at the same time, this is the data from our schools, and we had a reduction in drug use, bullying perpetration, bullying victimization. But when you see the 2 colors here, red is standard, which means they only did 8th grade lessons. Blue is comprehensive, which means that they did grades 6th, 7th, and 8th. And so what the data indicates here and what we push constantly is if you wait till 8th grade, certain violent behaviors like bullying perpetration and sexual violence perpetration will not be reduced because it's already too late. So again, we really push implementation early. Choose Peace, Stop Violence is another pro-social campaign that when we started with the grant, we only could afford to have 4 secondary schools with the highest rates of acts against persons to have it because it's very expensive and it's a 3-year program. We received another grant and we were able to use the money to now have it in every single secondary school. So over 100 secondary schools now have this, and these clubs push out the marketing materials with the data showing that at their school, some do, but most don't. So it's all about that curriculum and it really creates movement. Here's the data from the schools pre and post the Parkland tragedy. You'll see when Parkland occurred, both schools that had Choose Peace, Stop Violence and those schools that didn't have Choose Peace, Stop Violence had an extreme spike in threats. But for those schools that had Choose Peace, Stop Violence, they quickly reduced their numbers back toward the normal rates at a 21% reduction, whereas those without Choose Peace, Stop Violence, they only reduced down to 5% and it stayed pretty steady there. So that's why we really pushed it out, because we think that the data results will be very similar for us post-COVID. Save Promise Clubs is a very similar program, but it's in every elementary school. And then we also did a School Pride and Peace Week to counteract the TikTok challenges.
We want to come in with a different perspective, and I'm here today to challenge you to a new TikTok challenge. Our new TikTok challenge is #school.
And it was awesome. The kids did a lot of positive work. We also partnered with outside entities because we saw BSO is our police group, and they saw the uptick in threats and arrests. So we started focusing on that, and we meet bi-weekly to review it. We sent out a PSA contest. First, this one was created that's very professional from the district and pushed out on TikTok. Then we had students start to create messages about threats. And then we also have professional
One post
athletes
can change your life. Social
send out
media
their own
threats are no joke.
messages. Finally, tier 3 interventions with the grant. We are providing the top tier 3, 4 top tier 3 schools, tier 3 services, excuse me, for electronic misconduct, and those with the highest rates of acts against persons also get tier 3 services. We also purchase Suite 360 for whenever there's a disciplinary infraction, but also we made it available to every school and every teacher as needed. We also have pushed out the school resource locator, where community members and school staff can find resources that are based in schools anytime they feel there's a mental health concern. Questions? Sorry, ran a little over.
That was great, Amy.
So
When I saw this presentation, I'm like, are you gonna get through 45 slides in 25 minutes? And she's like, I got this. And sure enough, you got this. Any questions for Amy or the Broward County team? One quick question I had, and I know it was going quickly, so I might not have picked up on it. But if there are young people that you are noticing that are posting things that could potentially be violent, it sounded like you've created like a disciplinary policy to kind of intervene. Is that step 1, or is there like an intermediary step where there might be like restorative justice policies or protocols in place where you can kind of talk to that individual and be like, hey, you know, like, that's not cool. I saw the posting videos, but you know, are there opportunities between the post and discipline where you can have these interactions with young people?
So it depends what you're talking about. Once you enter the world of threats, particularly because of Parkland, we have zero room in terms of wiggle, period. Once a threat's made, it's taken very seriously and they're going to receive consequences. So that's why we do so much advertising and pushing out of these PSAs and posters to try to warn them that it's not a joke, please don't do it, because once it's done, we're finding they're just being arrested and that's that. We've had diversionary programs, and for the threats and stuff, they won't even have it. You know, they've removed them from those. But our main hope with different ones, for example, like citing as a disturbance, we were having so many fights started online in the community that then rolled onto school grounds, and then with the cyberbullying as well. So we really work to do the prevention, because once a threat is uttered, we don't have any wiggle.
Gotcha. Thank you for the answer.
Mhm.
Any other questions? Or we'll move to Lompoc. All right, thank you so much, Amy and the Broward County team. I know, talking to Shayla, you guys have been even doing some of that Think Before You Post training with parents and community members. And, you know, that's super important. If you have if sites have questions about Think Before You Post or the curriculum or anything like that, you know, let me or Amy know, and we can definitely try to connect you with some materials on that. So thank you very much, Broward County. And I'm gonna turn it over to Brian in Lompoc to talk about their work engaging community partners and starting to build a foundation for community violence intervention approaches. Brian.
Great, thank you, James. Good afternoon, everybody. So, yeah, I think it's been very inspiring to see all the presentations so far. Did the slide presentation go up on the screen?
You got it. It's there. Yep.
Great.
Thank you.
So on the one hand, you know, it's great to see all of the kind of details of the work that's gone into each of the programs as presented. What I'm going to present on is an idea that came out of the development of the grant and the grant application for youth violence prevention, but it really is none of the funds that we spent. And so it's not about really additional programming. It's really about how we decided to, as part of the grant activities, take a kind of community approach and an approach that would hopefully start to bring the community together. We had hoped that would be farther along than it is right now, but as you all know, the pandemic had other plans for a lot of our grant activities, and this one really was the most affected. However, we've made some progress, we've made some steps, and we'd like to share that with you today. So this is what originally was the Lompoc Youth Violence Task Force, and we've added what we call a coalition into it, and I'll explain that a little bit as we go. And there's the OJJDP disclaimer for your knowledge as well. But here's the journey. So we started with the idea of a task force, and the idea of the task force was really the idea that we can put together some great ideas and great tasks and actions, and we worked collaboratively with a couple of agencies in our grant application. But at the end of the day, that's what, as professionals, we believe is best to approach and mitigate the youth violence in our community. The idea of the task force was that we wanted to get more of the voice of the community involved in the process of what may come next after this. And so can we get not only kind of people that we know and can bring in, but can we go 2 or 3 layers deeper to people that we don't usually talk to, people that usually aren't involved in these conversations, and can we bring them into the conversation to make some decisions that maybe then the city Lompoc would be on board with, the agencies, and would become more of a community effort than we've had in the past in Lompoc, I think. And so that was the idea of the task force, and then which I'll get a little bit more into later. And then we ended up going to a coalition, and we have, which is more of a collaboration of agencies, and I'll talk about that. And then what we've moved to, which are community dialogues, as our effort to go into the task force. And then we've had some collaborative efforts with other agencies like CBPS Collective. This led to some safe routes to schoolwork, and student success class for parents at a particular school. So that's what I'll be discussing here. So as I've mentioned a little bit, our task force had some obstacles to success. The number one obstacle being the pandemic. We attempted to have some virtual meetings early on with parents. It was probably just a few months in the pandemic and the lockdown, or the closing of schools and people in their homes. And so we got very little participation. It was, everybody was doing everything virtually. And so it wasn't necessarily a surprise, but we were giving it a shot anyways, and we did. But everybody been to too many virtual meetings at that point. The focus really wasn't on the violence. In the lockdown, there wasn't the same level of violence as far as shootings in Lompoc, which is the violence that we had been experiencing, youth-involved shootings in Lompoc. So there was obviously a downtick of that, since people were in their houses primarily, and there wasn't as much interaction with people. So everybody's focus was not on the violence, and so to call for people to come together on that just didn't bring the interest that we had hoped. And so we tried that a couple of times, and then we kind of moved on. And what we moved on to was to step back and to create a coalition of agencies that then we could do some work with the agencies, and then also hopefully return to the idea of the task force at a later time. And so by establishing the coalition, and you can see we've kind of built the coalition over the last couple of years. And so I think we started out with maybe the first 5 agencies on the left side, and then we just kept kind of adding agencies as we went. We've added a couple of representatives from the city of Lompoc with the Parks and Recs. We've added a local pediatrician that got very involved. We've added some local churches, other organizations that are trying to address the issues as well, county probation. You can see the comprehensive list there. But what the coalition has been able to do has given kind of a forum for agencies to come in and discuss. For instance, the YMCA last summer designed and started a new program to target students that might be at risk of gang involvement or involvement in violence. And it was a new kind of 5-week program that they were launching. And so, they brought it to coalition, gave us, the ideas of what they were doing. We helped them with recruitment as a coalition. We're able to provide some support to their program. And so that's been kind of the model, is that the agencies have come in with their ideas and the things that they're trying to do. And then we were able to provide support to each of those initiatives as a group. So we've had monthly meetings since we started. Again, like I said, growing participation of agencies, and then kind of thinking of next steps as well. So the next step towards the task force has been the community dialogues, which we started, and then basically the idea has been to go out to community churches and to have the churches help with recruiting the community members that would be part of the dialogue. And we have some focus questions that I'll share with you later, and the results of the first dialogue that we had. And then we have 2, hopefully 3 coming up in the spring, now that the COVID rates have gone down. Places are feeling more comfortable having that in-person dialogue. Then the focus really has been in person for that. And then it's been a coalition of people, and the positive of the coalition has been that Lompoc is a fairly small town. For those, and I probably should have started with this, those that may not be familiar with where Lompoc is at, it's in Santa Barbara County, which is about an hour and a half north of Los Angeles. Lompoc in Santa Barbara County is much smaller than kind of the two big areas, Santa Barbara and Santa Maria. It's kind of set off of the main highway, and so it's really kind of isolated. And so it has a very kind of small town feel, even smaller than I think the population of the town. So there's a lot of people all kind of know each other, and so the coalition is people that are very invested in the town and very interested in the issue of youth violence. So that's helped, because really through the coalition, we have access to pretty much everything that's going on in the town. And so the coalition has provided that place for people to provide support and to kind of just connect those things together. So the community dialogues, and again, we've been able to hold one of these so far, and I have one scheduled for May and a couple others that will be scheduled for May or early June. Really is just to kind of take a step back and just hear the voice of the community. And so the first one that we had, I think we had about 12 members from that local church, and they'd invited a few other people in to that discussion. And these were pretty literally the questions that we asked. It was really, starting off with kind of the high kind of vision and goals for Lompoc and the youth of Lompoc, really trying to understand what the community members thought, what the obstacles they thought are present here in Lompoc, trying to understand what information they have about violence to see if, how well informed the community is, and then looking at some specific concerns that they have, what's happened in the past from their perspective, and what they might want to see in the future as far as ways to help mitigate the violence. And so, this will be included in the PowerPoint. So if you're interested in these questions, we developed them as a coalition. Also with our consultant, Sandra Espadas, from the Los Angeles area, also provided some technical assistance to get us to what we thought were the right questions to ask. And so what we got from that was, kind of a combination, really. We got a combination of some of these big ideas, a vision, like making sure that kids have a purpose, that they're engaged, that there was, some of the obstacles is that some people in the community are afraid of working with youth, just because of what they see in the media and what they're aware of, and kind of maybe a lack of parent involvement. And then on the other side, we got some very specific concerns. Like when I was talking to the group, they were mentioning, specific intersections, specific places behind the building where they thought there were safety concerns. So you can see, the list there of places where they thought there was safety in the community, which is just a very interesting perspective. I mean, it's interesting to see that they have both of those. Some of this information was from their grandchildren. Some of it was from the child from next door who they interact with quite often. And so it was, that was kind of the other piece, is that where this information was coming from was a lot of kind of word of mouth. There really wasn't, and wasn't kind of what, in their view, a reliable sense of information coming through the media or coming through from a local news outlet or something that they were getting most of the information from. So it was mainly just kind of informal sources of information. So those community dialogues, again, will be continuing, but that information is brought back to brought back to the coalition to discuss and kind of help guide our process forward towards the task force, and then also towards the initiatives that the agencies are engaged with. So another piece of what the coalition has done is we've been connected through our technical assistance to the CBPS collective, who had a conversation with us about what some of our needs were and some of the ways that they could help us. So there are a couple of ways that they propose to assist us with some technical assistance on a deeper level. And so we kind of took it back to the coalition ranked things, and we decided on a couple of items that they would help us with. And so one is the possibility of getting some consultation on skilled intervention workers around youth violence. We're finding a lot of our youth violence is related to gangs. And so looking at some models of intervention workers that can get into that system and try to, stir up the pot a little bit and break it up and maybe negotiate some peace terms among gangs or other kind of more involved things that we typically wouldn't do as a school district. Another one is a safe passage program, and we did have them come and present to our safety meeting, district safety meeting, and talk about safe passage and some ideas about having some intervention workers accompany students to and from school, and how that could have an impact on some of the fears and that kids have and families have of students going to and from school. And then at the middle school, we do have, statistically quite a few incidents of violence to and from school. And so we benefited from their participation as well. So kind of through that, we've kind of morphed a little bit into this focus on safe passage. We have a current initiative with the city of Lompoc that we were able to get involved in, and we may not have if we hadn't been having these conversations, because we reached out to somebody right as they were starting to write a grant application, and we're involved now in participating in that grant. So I think it's helped us to understand more of the things that are going on in Lompoc and be involved. Like I mentioned, the presentation to the district safety committee. And so we're looking at increasing some hours to our student supervision aides for that kind of after and before school, and then provide some training to be actively involved during student passage to and from school to hopefully support that. And so the city has identified this kind of band where they're focusing on, and that's something that we are kind of actively involved in. The other piece is the student success class for parents. And sorry. The purpose here is to engage parents in their students' educational progress through an after-school class that meets the unique the needs of that kind of parent group. And if you can just give me 1 second. Sorry, there's an emergency at one of my sites that I have to help with a little bit. There was a concern at one of our sites about some of the sixth graders that have been demonstrating some behaviors that are related to possibly fear of violence and such. And so the idea that we discussed and we met with some parents is to have a class to help parents understand how they can support their student success, and particularly tailored around this idea of violence in the community. And so we've developed the group, and what we've done as a coalition is help support that group in kind of discussing what the format of the group is going to be, and how we can support that group through the coalition. And so it's a group that would be run by a facilitator, probably one of the school social workers that we've developed or brought into the district. And it would bring in some resources to the parents, have some facilitated conversations, and then provide some resources and kind of training to the parents to think about how they can be engaging better with their students for success. And then I'm going to actually pass the presentation over to Paul to follow up on the next couple of slides. So you're right.
All right. So as Brian was saying, one of the focus areas that was at one of the sites with the success class for parents. And I know Sandra helped us with some of these questions for the parents and even for some of the students. Looking into the future, what does success look like? How can the school support you? What are some of the challenges that each parent is facing? Just so we can get a culmination of what is happening in their world, each family, so we could better support those families individually. And we wanted to try to start small because we realize this is a big challenge for some of these families. And so, again, Sandra helped with some of these questions and comments for these parents. And then in the future, we'd like to go with some of those questions to the students and see if those parent and student questions and answers matched. With our coalition, we wanted to also get some support from those members. Stephanie Saucedo has been a wonderful help to us in the community from the YMCA program. So she was going to do a outreach to help with our after-school programs. Another coalition member, Maribel, for the Promotores, which we've used in the past. Mario from our Lompoc Rec Department. Again, just some positive things for our youth to focus on instead of the negative attention that they're getting. Lene, one of our high school counselors, was going to try to work with a former Lompoc High student whose family, I actually worked with him and his family deep into gangs, the older brothers, the peer pressure that he was seeing since he was very young and growing up in that family, and the expectations his family had on him, but how he's turned a different direction and went to our junior college, graduated four-year college, getting his master's, and now coming back and actually speaking this year to some high school students on his story. So just that impact a former Lompoc High grad had on students, I know meant a lot. Paul Catan from Family Service Agency spoke on behalf of Lompoc Unified yesterday morning. Huge partner with Lompoc Unified School District, an advocate for us and for these parent classes. And then just again, there's not a magic answer for every student. So yoga for kids is becoming popular. So again, one of our FSA counselors, Martina, does yoga. So again, just trying to find any way to connect with these families and students. So we're going to continue to have our monthly meetings. As Brian said, we're hoping to go out later this month and next month to a few different places to get some more answers from the community. Expand some of the scope of what we're doing, more dialogue, more answers, but just allow the community to express their concerns so we have the data that we need. And I think just overall, meeting with the Newark team personally really gave me some eye-opening experiences of how that kind of overall has impacted me personally with how they found members of the community that had the passion to help these kids. Right after one of them mentioned a couple weeks ago when he spoke, there was some gang violence in the neighborhood. And there's a picture of one of the workers holding hands of two young children, walking them to school. That's the only way they would attend school, was with one of their employees from Newark and schools. So it's just the connections, the relationships they build is the key component to a lot of these things. So I can't say enough about how they've showed us the way and how we're going to try to do that with our own staff here. So a lot of information. I don't think we went over the time. Sorry about that, James. But
oh, you guys,
questions?
you're right on time. And you know, before we open it up to questions, I know Brian isn't there right now, but you know, I want to say to both of you how super impressed I am with the work that you all are doing. First, you know, we've put you in contact with some really great folks, Sandra and the Aquila E and the Newark Community Street Team. But it also takes you guys being willing to listen and to be able to work at this at your own pace and to figure out what works, what is it, where, how do we want to go moving forward. And you know, one of the things that Brian said at the beginning was it's taken a lot longer than we kind of expected. And that's the thing about community violence intervention approaches. It does take time. It's not like a magic wand. You're gonna sprinkle some fairy dust and all of a sudden you're changing the community and the community violence that's occurring in your community. It requires all of these partners to interact with one another and hear from each other and hear from the community. And, you know, to be able to separate fact from fiction, because there's the one story that you hear, and then there's the actual what's happening on the ground in the communities. And to be able to have all these partners working together, figuring out, you know, what they're good at and how they can fit in all of this big puzzle that you all are building to address community violence is super inspiring. And this foundation that you are building is something that's sustainable. You know, it's, you know, I think Brian also said in the beginning, it's, you know, it doesn't necessarily take money to do this. It doesn't. It takes your willingness to build these relationships and, you know, to, you know, as my friends from Georgia had said way back when, to, you know, get on the same sheet of music. I always love that phrase. You know, just to, you know, to get yourself all in, you know, rowing in the same direction. So, you know, you're putting in really hard work to do something significant for Lompoc. And so, you know, kudos to you, kudos to your school. And the other thing, you know, one quick, sorry, I'm taking up a whole bunch of time, but there's also going to be a lot of federal funding around community violence intervention approaches in the next couple of months that you'll be seeing. A lot of times communities forget to include schools. And I wholeheartedly believe that if you're including schools as part of this coalition, you're going to make yourself much more likely to get one of these grant programs, because folks often forget the schools and forget how important you are to the community. You're one of the two, you know, major, I'd say, city agencies in a community. You know, there's a city government, there's the schools and the police, and the schools, that's where everything happens. So for communities to include the schools in community violence intervention strategies and approaches as a partner, as a critical partner, you guys are putting yourself in a really good position if you guys are applying for that money going forward. So, you know, I encourage folks that, you know, if you're thinking about community violence intervention approaches, first, it takes time, it takes a lot of hard work, but, you know, really look at how you and your schools can support this work and build partnerships. So that's my very long-winded way to say, really impressed with the work that you all are doing. Brian, Paul, the entire team in Lompoc. Kudos to you all. Anybody have any questions for the team?
I did. Sorry, I stepped away. A student came in. So I'm not sure if this was already touched on. But I just had a question about, just the practice of how does the team practice that self-care for themselves? Because I come from Chicago, and then I spent 10 years working with gang affiliated youth, and I know how brutal and exhausting that work can be, right? It's work that is just, I think, constant trauma exposure. And also I just want to applaud the fact that you do that work because it's so necessary, right? It's really a practice of, I really believe in keeping people alive, right? And changing the direction of outcomes that could be really terrible. So I'm just wondering, like, for you and your team, how do you practice that for yourselves, that practice of self-care, so that you're not depleted and you have the capacity to keep going?
Sorry about that. In our district, in the past couple of years, we found kind of an old wood shop closet here at the district, turned it into a weight room. And it's open to all employees, so we encourage to do that. We've paid, I think I showed you on there, Martina, who does from Family Service Agency. She does yoga, and we have free yoga classes weekly for our employees that are interested. Many of our meetings that we attend Zoom, we'll spend the first couple minutes just making sure we're doing exactly what Rebecca's doing right now, and that's just stretching and taking a couple minutes. What's that? I can't think of that app. The commercial we on TV, Calm. We just purchased Calm for all employees of the district to get on our laptops or phones and just spend a minute a day or anytime you need to, just to kind of de-stress and gather ourselves. So just a multitude of ways of trying to encourage to take care of ourselves. Our deputy superintendent sends bright spots out every morning at 6:45 in the morning from all over the district, focusing on kids and focusing on the bright spots. So we know there's a lot of tough times going on with many families, but we try to bring those bright spots in as much as possible. So I hope that answered your question a little bit.
Thank you.
Other questions for Paul over in Lompoc? All right, we're gonna open it up to questions for either Lompoc, Broward County, or just a general open discussion. We've got, let's see, how much time do we have before we move into the final part? We're supposed to be moving 4:35, so we'll give it, I don't know, 5 minutes. Anybody have questions for the entire group or resources you want to share? All right, I think we're all getting ready to get to the end of this. So I will make sure we move us along. I'm picking up your cues. So I'll kick it over to LeVar. And before I kick it over to LeVar real quick, I'm going to put in the chat a survey tool, a post-convening survey tool. Really appreciate your feedback on what your thoughts of the convening were, how we can improve it, what went well, and what are opportunities. I like no challenges, but opportunities. So what are the opportunities for further improvement? So I'm going to put that in the chat while LeVar kicks us off to the final section.
Yes. We've made it. Thank goodness, right? Almost there, folks, almost there. One last quick session we want to do on sustainability. That was something that it's a word that kept coming up throughout the last 2 days. So, this is extremely important for us to dive into this. I think James mentioned at the beginning of yesterday's session that we plan on hosting a sustainability webinar that's more comprehensive and will dive a little bit more deeper than this conversation that we're going to have. But we just wanted to, take a few minutes. And again, I promise you it's not going to take long. So we will be out in the sun shining, having the sun shine on our face shortly. But first, before we get into that discussion about sustainability, I just want to say Thank you guys for your participation. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for being active throughout the last 2 days. I think it was said before, but it's extremely difficult doing these convenings that our team is used to doing in person, and being very interactive and getting to know people more. It's been challenging doing this through a virtual setting, but just want to thank you guys once again for your participation and really stepping up to the plate. So when talking about sustainability, I think we all know just how important sustainability is to the projects we run and the work that you folks are doing. We know how important it is to, keeping that local momentum going, to keeping local partners engaged, to really maintaining those valuable connections that, you work so hard to create between students and parents. So we know just how important it is to sustain this work. But we also know how challenging it can be to sustain the work without proper resources, right? And at the same time, I think we've also, based on the work that we've done with sites across the country, in different programs, we've also seen folks develop some very creative responses to a lot of those challenges, right? Whether that's identifying strategic partnerships that can aid in promoting sustainability, or whether that's engaging in enhanced engagement, community engagement, to pull in additional resources, or even taking the time to conduct impact evaluations to sort of highlight the work that you've done, the value of the work you've done, and the impact that your work has had on the youth that you serve. So what we want to do now is just hear from you for the last couple minutes that we're going to be on this convening. We want to hear from you as to what, thinking about CYVP and the work that you've done, what's one thing that you can identify that you would love to sustain through your CYVP work, right? And the way we're going to climb into this conversation, we're going to go around, we're going to hear from everyone very quickly. But the way we're going to dive into this conversation is by posing a question. And that question is, as we move into the latter stages of this grant program, what is one thing CYVP Grant Resources has been able to support that you want to see continue post CYVP, and what efforts are you making to ensure that that work is sustained? So right now, I'm going to just take a second to put this question into the chat. Like I said, we want to hear from everyone, so we're going to go around, and I would say, I'm sure, as was alluded to, everyone wants to get out of here as soon as possible. So I would ask to keep your responses to that question to about 2 or 3 minutes. But yeah, let's dig in. Let's hear from you guys around sustainability. So first, let's send it over to Austin, our friends in Austin.
Thank you, Barb. Thank you all so much for all of this. It's been great. I think the thing that comes up for me is key personnel. Everybody that works in a school system is stretched really thin. A lot of our specialists and support staff for campuses have up to 20 campuses in their caseload and workload. Sometimes that could mean, hundreds of students with need. So just that we were able to have personnel to work specifically on the grant, work specifically with other departments with the grant, share our work with them, and hopefully, sustain some of the work that we're building and some of the shifts in culture that we're creating.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I mean, that's exactly one of the first things I think of when it comes to sustainability as well, is that people power, right? You got to have those people in place to get the work off the ground. And I think, as was mentioned during one of the last sessions, there's a lot of stuff that you can do for free, right? Especially when it comes to engagement and outreach, right? But you need people in place to do that work. So sustaining those positions is critically important. Let's go over to Spokane. Again, if there's one thing that you've done throughout your CYVP grant, what would be the one thing that you would want to sustain, and how are you working to make sure that can happen?
Well, I would want to, it would be the people. I mean, we have 110 kids that we are actively mentoring, and I have 4 great mentors, plus myself. So, I mean, and they're on the line. So that's what I would want to maintain. It goes back to the relationships too. The work that we're doing with the youth, we can't have that without our bodies. We've established relationships. We've established rapport, not just with the children, but also with administration, right? We get to go into these schools almost invited. And so the concept of having to restart that is pretty rough. But as far as obtaining extra funding, I mean, we're presenting at school community groups, sharing what we're doing, groups that make recommendations to the board of SPS as far as funding. So we've done that. And, you know, we're asking for support from the district. So we're hopeful.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. Let's go to Lancaster County. Let's hear from you guys. Still got someone from Lancaster County?
I think Sharon was in the
She had to
car, so
jump?
she might have had to drop off for a bit. So
Okay, there we go. Let's go to Broward County.
Right. So if there's one program that we would like to see continue, it would be the Think Before You Post program, because it teaches students to be cognizant about their posts and how it can affect their future. Also teaches them about sexting, sexual predators, the consequences of inappropriate online behavior, as well as cyberbullying. And so some of the ways that we are going to sustain or trying to sustain the program, we review the school data monthly and quarterly. We've been engaging the community by presenting to child advocacy groups, the school advisory council meetings and parent nights. We've even established a committee that consists of other community partners such as Women in Distress, United Way, which is already one of our partners, Children's Services Council, the Broward Behavioral Health Coalition, and the Promise program that we have here in Broward County, which stands for Preventing Recidivism Through Opportunities, Mentoring, Intervention, Support, and Education. And so we've also, with the help of James, also collaborated with the Newark Community Street Team, where we've already started dialogue about CVI, the Community Violence Interventions, and how we can create a pilot program in Broward County. And now I'm going to turn it over to my partner, Mitch, who's going to talk about the partnerships that we have, another partnership.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Shayla. Well, actually, excuse me. Actually, we have 2 partners that we work with, but for time, they told me I could only speak about one. But what we have a partnership with Papa John Pizza, where they go into the Think Before You Post program. And I'll just read the flyer, and then hopefully I'll show you all the flyer. Maybe you can see it. It says, at the end of the program, each student who completes the program will be awarded a certificate of achievement, 1 large pizza, at the completion ceremony with Papa John's mascot, Mr. Slice. And so we did some math just a little bit earlier. Let me show. Can you see the flyer? Higher?
That's
Can you
good.
see it now?
You can see it, yes.
You can see, okay. So we did some number crunching, and once this program is completed with these students, it's almost going to be like 10,000 students who's going to receive a certificate, and then of course the pizza. And I did a little, math of what it's going to cost Papa John's. It's going to be over $120,000. And this is just for 17 schools. We have over 200 and some odd schools. Obviously, a lot of those are elementary, but the middle and high school. So you can imagine that, Papa John's is making an investment, in our students. So we like them. And then I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to take like 10 seconds to talk about our next partner real quick before everybody gets upset from Broward. It's called the Florida Barber Academy, and they go out to any schools that we work with, and they cut the students' hairs for free. And so the big thing that we're not pushing right now is the juvenile justice, which is my background pretty much for like almost 30 years, is that they go to the detention center at least once a month, cut hairs. They was there a week or so ago and cut over 30 young men's hair. And then last week they went back with cosmetology, and there was 6 girls who got provided services with nails, getting their hair braided, pedicures or and whatever. So, and it's, just to make them feel good. Okay, that's it. I'm done.
No worries at all. Thank you so much for sharing that information. I would love to learn more about that barbership program also. Like that'd be something I'd love to introduce to folks here in Baltimore. But yeah, engagement. I can't state that more, right? Especially the different community collaboratives that exist in and around your school, right? In those neighborhoods you serve. I've seen so much in my time come out of those partnerships that have been established, where the schools were able to bring in so many new additional resources due to being engaged in those type of collaboratives. So yeah, good stuff. Laconia, let's go over to you folks. Anyone on from Laconia? Let's go to El Rancho.
Hi, so what has YVV supported? I mean, so many things. Teen Court, our Promise program, our mental health, Boys and Girls Club. I mean, a lot of things, a lot of diversion programs that we have for students here. Absolutely would love to keep everything. When YVV came to us, we already had some of these things already established. They helped us continue. So that's been wonderful. Where we're at the point where, okay, we're sunsetting. What are we going to do next? What is our sustainability plan? I mean, obviously, having those community partners, and we talked earlier about the need for mental health and also the fact that there's not enough money in school districts to be able to support personnel. But having those community partnerships and being able to refer students for services has been wonderful. So that definitely is something that's come out from, having our local advisory committee and meeting with them. Also, not only that, but also being able to talk about the bigger picture. We all share students, we all share families. This is our community. So it's not just one person's work, it's the work of an entire community. So how can we help each other make sure that we're supporting our families? So that to me is something that's very important. Of course, our mental health supports, which again, earlier, as we mentioned, not only, provide those supports and those referrals for mental health concerns, but for an array of issues that are, unfortunately our families and our students experience these days. So, seeing how we can continue to support that. Our district has been great in that they understand the importance. I think now, when we first started with mental health back in 2009, we were still campaigning on reducing the stigma behind mental health. You think about all the work that has been accomplished up until this point. You have families that are understanding and actually requesting services. So now I think nationally I'm hearing, more buzz around the supports for mental health, making sure that we have some funding available for that. But then again, the bigger idea here is to make sure that they understand how important it is. In our Boys and Girls Club, I would love to continue our Boys and Girls Club in partnership with our Sheriff's Department to have a safe place for our kids to go after school where they feel that they belong and where they can enjoy themselves. Our app Promise Youth, the biggest problem there is always they feel like they don't belong somewhere. The school environment may be something that is not positive for them. As much as we try to provide certain things, sometimes they just feel like they don't fit. We want to make sure that they are able to have a space where they can feel like they belong to something, and they're there with peers of their own age, as well as with some mentors. So that's where I would like to. I mean, I'm sure my staff has a bunch of other ideas, but me, that's where I would go.
Awesome. Love that whole community. Love that. All right. Chester.
Okay, so obviously we have a lot that has worked well for us, a lot of programs that have worked really well for our students and families that we serve that had come out of this program design. And as much as I would love to say we definitely want to sustain youth courts, I know that we're going to sustain youth courts. It's been one of the most successful programs in our design, but we also, I guess the way we wrote youth courts into the grant, the way it was modeled, we also built in this, sustainability for that program beyond the grant, funds or the grant period. And so youth courts is self-sufficient, or will be self-sufficient, above 50% beyond the grant period. The program that I really would like us to focus on sustaining, which may or may not be able to be sustained after the grant period, will be our violence-free zone program. And that, somebody mentioned it earlier, the real big piece there is the human capital. Those credible messengers in our program have made such a dent in just the behaviors that our students have had prior to coming to the violence-free zone program, prior to being participants, to now, to date. And just the genuine relationships that they've developed with the students, just the retention of, those credible messengers hanging in there, staying, on board, remaining in their positions, showing that consistency to the students as their mentors, as their guides. It's amazing. These credible messengers are, people who are directly from the communities that we serve, and these are the same communities the students and neighborhoods the students and their families live in. And these credible messengers are the most ideal people who can do this work. It's different than being a building aide. It's different than being a paraprofessional, because these folks have the lived experience that is I think the ultimate divider when you're talking about, relatability and credibility. And I've seen in data as well as anecdotal feedback how these credible messengers in this violence-free zone program has made a difference at the middle school. So I would say definitely want to sustain the violence-free zone program and the human capital that supports it.
That's excellent. Two quick things. One, highlight of the day, young scholars, no doubt about it. So love hearing that you guys are planning on sustaining youth court. And just to reiterate something that James mentioned earlier, right now there's a ton of CBI funding that's going to be coming out of the federal government. There's local ARPA funding that's being utilized by, cities and municipalities across the country. You have some states like here in Maryland starting to step up to the plate to fund CBI work. So when, talking about those, credible messengers and those street outreach workers, hopefully we're going to see some resources that can come to bear to keep some of these people in place. So keep checking Basecamp, because as a lot of these solicitations come out, we'll be posting more about that. Lastly, Lompoc.
All right. I think one thing we want to obviously continue sustaining is that coalition. It's been, I still remember a couple of years ago when I first saw in city council, there was the police department and the mayor trying to see what they could do to help with the youth violence. Numbers were drastically going up very quickly. Instead of adults doing these violent crimes, it was our youth. And then there was a couple other groups in town. And I have to give Brian credit for starting our coalition and continuing it. I have not heard from some of the others. And so the sustainability of slowly gathering these important stakeholders and community partners in this coalition, I think has been the key. And intentionally inviting certain groups to the table. I think another important key thing is just to listen. Listen to these stakeholders, whether they're youth or adults, somebody who's just moved here or have been here for years. Definitely continuing to collaborate with Newark Community Street Team. Somebody mentioned it earlier, but E and Kim and Akila, they have so much knowledge, but we can't just copy what they're doing and, like you said, James, make that puzzle fit. You can't force it. We have to adjust what works for them and adjust it for us. And so that's what we're kind of doing right now, is massaging that and sharing what we've learned to some of these partners. And again, as a group, coming up with what works for Lompoc. And I think those are our next steps. And to make our coalition sustainable is to really listen to our stakeholders and build that capacity here in town. You know, again, the old quote, you know, if you give a man a fish, he'll be hungry tomorrow. But we have to teach a man to fish; he'll be richer forever. So it's a marathon, and we're ready to be part of that marathon with the community. But thank you for this, you know, OJGDP, for this support, and we're going to continue this fight.
Awesome, Paul. Thank you so much for sharing. All right, thank you all. I think you did that perfectly. I think we're looking at some good time here. So James, I'll send it back over to you.
Yeah, just I'll be very brief. Thank you so much for your presentations, sharing your information. You all are super inspiring, given what's happening in your local communities and states that we're all working in the country, and like Isaac said, in the nation as well. You know, we're all going through some things, and I'm really thankful that you all are playing such a critical role in supporting students in your communities, and hopefully we can help share your stories to other communities throughout the country. Last but not least, one, don't forget the survey tool, and second, there's a lot of, like LeVar was saying, a lot of federal funding, a lot of state funding around community violence intervention approaches, but also around alternative responses to persons in crisis, whether it be behavioral crisis, substance abuse crisis. And a lot of times folks don't think about the role schools play in this. And I think you all have demonstrated more eloquently than I could ever have the need of this work in our schools with both students, families, communities, teachers, the entire gambit. So, you know, please think about applying for those funds. If you have any questions about that, don't hesitate to reach us. This is something that is near and dear to, you know, definitely to LeVar and I. We always are talking about alternative responses and how schools and communities can rethink how public safety responds to community in a way that isn't punitive, but is, you know, addressing the root causes of the challenges that you all are experiencing. And it's all about relationships. So again, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Please fill out the survey, and we'll see you a little bit later. Thank you so much. Take care.
Bye. Thank you.